What would you do if you discovered that the person you rejected out of shame just became a millionaire? Imagine the gut-wrenching moment when you realize you denied your own father in front of wealthy friends, only to find out he had won the lottery and planned to share everything with you. The shame of our origins can cost us more than we ever imagined. And this Easter, one young woman will learn the most painful lesson about worth, family, and true wealth. This story will touch your heart and make you question what really matters in life. People are abandoning their values and relationships for social acceptance every day, but we rarely see the devastating consequences of these choices. Stay until the end to witness a powerful transformation that will remind us all of the true meaning of Easter. Not just chocolate and celebrations, but rebirth, renewal, and the chance to build something new from the ashes of our greatest mistakes. His daughter doesn't know he won the lottery and abandons him at Easter. Before we begin this emotional story, please share in the comments which city you're watching from. It would be my pleasure to give your comment a little heart. Now, let's start this touching story. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if everything you thought you knew about someone was only the surface of who they truly were? What if the person you were most ashamed of held the key to your future? What if the holiday meant to celebrate rebirth and second chances became the backdrop for your own personal resurrection story? John Miller had raised his daughter alone, after his wife Mary died of cancer when Julia was just 7 years old. A builder by trade, his calloused hands had provided everything for his daughter, from their modest home to her college education. With each brick he laid, with each wall he built, he was constructing not just buildings, but a future for his beloved child. But something had changed in Julia during her first year away at university. The daughter who once proudly introduced her father to everyone was now distant, almost a stranger in the home they had shared for so many years. Another day, another blessing, Mary. I know you're watching over us. I'm going to tell Julia about the surprise today. After all these years of struggle, I can finally give her everything we dreamed of. John whispered to a framed photo of his late wife, her smile forever frozen in time, her eyes still seeming to twinkle with the love that had sustained him through the lonely years. He touched the photo tenderly, his rough fingertips a stark contrast to the smooth glass, then looked at another photo of his beautiful daughter Julia, her graduation cap slightly askew, her smile radiant with promise and possibility. Our little girl is all grown up now. College, fancy friends. Sometimes I wonder if she even remembers where she came from. If she remembers the nights we ate macaroni because it was all we could afford, or how she used to wait for me at the window when I worked late, just to give me a hug before bedtime. His phone rang, breaking the moment of reflection, the familiar ringtone, Julia's favorite song from when she was 13, filling the quiet kitchen. Good morning, sweetheart. Are we still on for lunch? I have something important to tell you. John's voice was eager, almost boyish in his excitement. Today was the day he would finally share his secret, the blessing that had fallen into their lives like manna from heaven. Dad, I can't talk right now, Julia interrupted, her voice hurried, impatient, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses in the background drowning out the warmth in John's greeting. I'm with Caroline and the others planning the Easter break trip. Can we talk later? But Julia, we always spend Easter together. It's been our tradition since... John clutched the phone tighter, as if he could physically hold on to the connection that seemed to be slipping away with each syllable. Dad, I'm not a little girl anymore, Julia sighed. That particular tone of exasperation that only a child can perfect when speaking to a parent they believe doesn't understand. Besides, Caroline's parents invited me to their lake house. It's going to be amazing. They have a chef coming in to prepare Easter dinner, and there's going to be a sunrise service on their private beach. Julia, please. This Easter is special. I need to tell you something that will change everything for us. John tried again, desperation edging into his typically steady voice. The envelope in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest. The secret inside both wonderful and now, somehow terrifying. I've got to go. My friends are waiting. Bye, Dad. The call ended with the jarring beep that felt like a door slamming in John's face. The call ended abruptly. John stared at the phone, then at the small envelope tucked in his work jacket pocket. Inside was the confirmation that would change their lives forever, if only she would listen. If only she could see past what she was running from. Just a few more days of this, he whispered to himself, running a hand over his weathered face. Then everything changes. Everything. He looked again at Mary's photo, seeking comfort in her familiar eyes. I wish you were here, darling. You'd know what to say to her. You always did. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, John picked up his trusted toolbox, the same one Mary had given him on their first anniversary, and headed out to what might be his last day of work at the only job he'd known for 25 years. Later that day at the upscale university campus, Julia walked with a group of wealthy-looking students, their designer clothes and carefree laughter marking them as members of a world John had never been able to provide for his daughter. A world she had fought so hard to enter, and now seemed desperate to belong to at any cost. So your dad's definitely not coming for the Easter break, right? Caroline examined her perfectly manicured nails, the tiny diamonds embedded in the polish, catching the sunlight. My parents are very particular about guests. Last year, Melissa brought her cousin without asking, and Daddy was furious. Said it threw off the whole seating arrangement. No, he's working. He's always working, Julia replied hesitantly, adjusting her second-hand designer bag, a lucky thrift store find she'd splurged 3 weeks' work-study pay on. Easter is a busy time in construction. Spring projects. You know, the lie tasted bitter in her mouth, but not as bitter as the truth would sound to these ears. What does your dad do again, banking like my father? Brad asked casually, his arm draped over Caroline's shoulder, his family's old money evident in the casual confidence with which he wore his wealth, never having to prove anything to anyone. Julia froze momentarily, the question she'd been dreading finally spoken aloud. In the months she'd been friends with this group, she'd carefully constructed a vague background, never outright lying, but never telling the complete truth either. He's in construction management. Oh, does he own the company? Caroline seemed impressed, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising slightly. Something like that. Julia offered a vague smile, the half-truth closing her throat like a vice. Her father did manage projects, after all. It wasn't a complete fabrication, just an embellishment, a small one, for survival. Suddenly, a work truck pulled up nearby, the logo of Harrington Construction clearly visible on its dusty side. John stepped out in his worn work clothes, a small package in his hands, waving happily when he spotted his daughter. Julia, sweetheart! Julia's face drained of color as her friends looked confused, the carefully constructed world she'd built beginning to crumble around her like a house of cards in a sudden wind. Who is that man calling you? Caroline whispered, a hint of scandal already creeping into her tone, the possibility of gossip lighting her eyes with interest. John approached the group, smiling warmly, oblivious to the social catastrophe unfolding in his daughter's mind. Sorry to interrupt, honey. You left your medication at home. I knew you'd need it for the weekend, so I brought it during my lunch break. He handed her a small bag which she took quickly, her fingers barely touching his, as if his calloused hands might somehow mark her as different, as other, in front of her carefully cultivated friends. Thank you, she murmured, wishing the ground would open up and swallow her whole. Julia, who is this? Brad looked confused, his gaze moving between the elegantly dressed Julia and the clearly working-class man standing before them, the disconnect evident in his puzzled expression. John Miller, Julia's father. Nice to meet you all. John extended his hand, pride shining in his eyes as he looked at his daughter, completely unaware of the emotional chasm opening between them with each passing second. An awkward silence followed, before Julia blurted out, the words tumbling from her mouth before she could stop them. He's just the builder working on our house. He's not my father." John's smile froze on his face, the hand he had extended in friendly greeting suspended in the air as if time itself had stopped. "What did you say?" The words were barely audible, a breath of disbelief carried on a whisper of pain. But he just said, Caroline began, confusion evident in her voice. "It's a joke between us." Julia laughed nervously, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. "He's been working on our house for so long. He feels like family. Right, John?" John's eyes filled with hurt, a deep, soul-wounding pain that seemed to age him 10 years in an instant. But slowly, with the dignity that had carried him through every hardship life had thrown his way, he lowered his hand and nodded, becoming the character his daughter had cast him as. "Right, just a joke." He glanced at his watch, the battered timepiece another stark contrast to the gleaming accessories of Julia's friends. "I should get back to the site. Enjoy your afternoon, Miss Julia." As John walked away, shoulders slumped, under the weight of his daughter's rejection, Brad watched him leave with a curious expression. That was weird. He seemed pretty convinced he was your dad. "He's just an odd old man. Comes from a completely different world," Julia said defensively, watching her father's retreating back, each step he took seeming to echo with the words she had just spoken. Different world. Different world. Different world. That evening, unable to concentrate on her studies, consumed by guilt yet still burning with embarrassment, Julia drove to her childhood home, the modest 2-bedroom house where she had grown. Up seemed smaller somehow, less significant against the backdrop of the affluent world she had been inhabiting. "Dad, why did you have to embarrass me like that today?" she demanded, entering without greeting, dropping her keys on the small table in the hallway, the same table where she had once displayed her elementary school art projects with pride. John looked up from his dinner, a simple sandwich eaten alone at the kitchen table, with surprise. "Embarrass you?" "Julia, I was just bringing your allergy medication. I didn't want you to get sick over the weekend." "You could have texted me. You didn't have to show up in your work truck covered in dust calling me sweetheart in front of everyone." The words poured out, fueled by shame and confusion, and the desperate need to belong that had been driving her actions for months. "Since when is your father saying hello an embarrassment?" John asked, clearly hurt, pushing his plate away, his appetite gone. "Since when did you become ashamed of who we are?" "You don't understand. Caroline's father is a neurosurgeon. Brad's dad owns 3 hotels. Rachel's mother is a judge." Julia paced the small kitchen, gesturing wildly. "And then there's you, showing up in your work clothes, in that old truck, making it obvious that I don't belong in their world. And your father is a builder. The same builder who worked double shifts to put food on our table. The same builder who's paying for your college education." John's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the gentleness. "The same builder who held you every night for months after your mother died, promising that somehow we'd make it through. That's the problem," Julia exploded, tears threatening to spill over. "Do you know what it's like being the scholarship kid among people who've never worried about money? Whose parents give them credit cards and new cars? Who go to Europe for spring break instead of working extra shifts at the campus coffee shop? Is that what this is about? Money?" John asked softly, a dawning realization in his eyes. "You're ashamed of me because we're not rich? It's about fitting in. It's about not being the poor girl with the blue-collar dad." The tears came now, hot and fast, years of insecurity pouring out. "It's about walking into a room and knowing you belong there, not constantly feeling like you're one mistake away from everyone realizing you're a fraud." Silence filled the room, heavy and oppressive, broken only by Julia's muffled sobs. "I thought I raised you to be proud of who you are, of where you come from." John's voice was breaking, the pain evident in every syllable. Your mother and I taught you that character matters more than cash, that how you treat people is more important than what you own. Well, I'm not. I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm just not. And I won't be spending Easter here. Caroline invited me to their lake house, and I'm going. Julia wiped her tears angrily, hardening her heart against the wounded look in her father's eyes. Julia, please. This Easter is important. I have something to tell you that will change everything. John reached for the envelope in his pocket, desperation in his movement. Nothing you could say would change how I feel right now, Julia interrupted, backing away. I'm staying at Caroline's until the break. Don't call me, don't text me, and please don't show up at campus again. Julia walked to the door and turned, her hand on the knob, a lifetime of love and connection balanced against her newfound desire to reinvent herself. Maybe it's better if we just take some space from each other. The door slammed with a finality that echoed through the empty house. John collapsed into a chair, pulling out the envelope from his pocket, a lottery ticket confirmation with numbers that had changed everything and nothing all at once. $20 million, he whispered to the empty room. And I've lost the only thing that ever mattered. Outside in her car, Julia finally allowed herself to cry properly, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Part of her wanted to run back inside, to throw herself into her father's arms like she had as a little girl, to beg his forgiveness for the cruel words. But another part, the part that had been striving so hard to reinvent herself, to fit into this new world, held her back. Pride and shame battled within her as she drove away, neither the victor, both casualties in a war she never intended to wage. That night, John knelt beside his bed, the way he had every night since Mary's death. To pray, his knees ached on the hard floor, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Lord, he whispered, I don't understand your plan here. I thought this money was a blessing, a way to secure Julia's future. But instead, it's shown me how far apart we've grown. She's ashamed of me, of the life we've built together. His voice broke. Please, guide me. Show me how to reach her. How to help her see that what matters isn't what we have, but who we are. That the resurrection power we celebrate at Easter isn't just about eternal life, but about being made new each day. Help her find her way back to the values we taught her. He paused, tears flowing freely now. And forgive me, Lord, if my pride in my work, in providing for her through honest labor, has somehow failed her. If I've missed something important along the way. John climbed into bed, exhausted from the emotional battering of the day, but sleep eluded him. Instead, memories flooded his mind. Julia's first steps across this very room, her first day, of school in a secondhand uniform he'd stayed up all night altering, so no one would know it wasn't new. Her high school graduation where she'd hugged him so tight and whispered, "We did it, Dad. You and me. We showed everyone." When had that proud, resilient girl become this status-conscious young woman who could deny her own father? And what could he do to help her find her way back? As dawn broke on Good Friday, John knew what he had to do. It wouldn't be enough to tell Julia about their change in fortune. He would have to show her, not just the power of money to transform, how others saw them, but more importantly, the enduring power of love to remain constant despite outward appearances. And to do that, he would need to enter her world, if only temporarily. Over the next few days, John was busy making phone calls and meeting with bankers and lawyers, his simple life suddenly complicated by wealth he had never sought, and, now, almost resented. "Mr. Miller, I must say, it's not every day we help a lottery winner of your background," the banker remarked, his expensive suit and perfectly coiffed hair marking him as a member of the world Julia so desperately wanted to join. "Most people in your position make very different choices." "What do you mean?" John asked, uncomfortable in the plush leather chair that seemed to swallow his frame. Unused to the deferential treatment suddenly being shown to a man who, just days ago, would have been directed to a more appropriate financial institution. Well, frankly, most buy mansions, sports cars, take exotic vacations. Your requests are unique. The banker shuffled the papers John had brought, detailing his plans for the money. Setting up college funds for your employees' children? Buying the construction company but keeping all staff employed with raises? Donating to cancer research? These are unusual priorities. I've worked hard all my life, sir, John replied firmly, his back straightening, his dignity intact despite the banker's thinly veiled condescension. Money doesn't change who I am. It just gives me new tools to do what matters. The banker leaned forward slightly, curiosity overcoming his professional reserve. If you don't mind my asking, Mr. Miller, why the rush with all these arrangements? Most lottery winners take months to decide how to manage their windfall. John's eyes grew distant. Easter is coming. It's a time of rebirth, of resurrection, of things once dead coming back to life. He smiled sadly, including, I hope, my relationship with my daughter. Later at the offices of Harrington Construction, his old workplace of 25 years, John met with his longtime co-worker and friend Anthony, the only person besides his lawyers who knew about his windfall. John, I don't understand. You won millions and you're buying the company? Anthony leaned against a filing cabinet, shaking his head in disbelief. Most guys would be on a beach somewhere, not signing papers to take on more responsibility. This place gave me a chance. When I had nothing, Anthony, a single dad with a young daughter and no college degree. Mr. Harrington believed in me when no bank would give me a loan for a car, let alone a house. John looked around the modest office, memories in every corner. He let me bring Julia to work when she was sick, and I couldn't afford a babysitter. He came to her school plays when she had no other family to cheer for her. But he's retiring, selling the business, Anthony reminded him, though he couldn't hide the hope in his eyes. Everyone had been dreading the sale, knowing most new owners would cut staff to maximize profits. And now it won't be sold to some corporation that'll fire half the crew. These men are family. They stayed by me through Mary's illness, through raising Julia alone. John put a hand on Anthony's shoulder. You all carried me when I couldn't stand. I don't forget that, lottery or no lottery. Boss wouldn't recognize you in that fancy suit, Anthony said emotionally, noticing John's new attire, a far cry from his usual work clothes. Maybe not, but he'd understand why I'm wearing it. John straightened his tie, still uncomfortable, in the formal wear. Sometimes you have to speak the language of the world you're trying to change. Anthony hesitated. Julia called me today, looking for you. She seemed worried. What did you tell her? John asked sharply. Nothing about the lottery, just that you'd been at the car dealership. Anthony studied his friend's face. She sounded upset, John. Maybe you should call her. John shook his head. Not yet. She needs to understand something first. Something I can't just tell her. I have to show her. And what's that? That appearance can be deceiving. That people will treat you differently based on what they think you have, not who they know you to be. John's expression hardened slightly, and most importantly, that true love, like her mother's and mine for her, never changes, regardless of circumstances. When John visited a high-end tailor for fitting suits later that day, the man circled him with a professional eye, making small adjustments to the elegant garment. The transformation is remarkable, Mr. Miller. If I may say so, you wear success well, the tailor commented, adjusting the sleeve length. Some men look uncomfortable in fine clothing, as if they're wearing a costume. You carry it with dignity. Just need to look the part for a while, John explained, studying his reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing himself. My daughter. She needs to see something different before she can understand what's always been there. Sounds like there's quite a story there, the tailor remarked, pins held carefully between his lips as he marked the jacket for alterations. There is a story about Easter, about resurrection, second chances, and hopefully, redemption. John smiled sadly at his reflection, about a father learning that sometimes, to reach your child, you have to meet them where they are, not where you wish they would be. The tailor nodded thoughtfully. I had a similar situation with my son. Different circumstances, but the same pain. Sometimes they have to make their own mistakes to appreciate the truth. Did your son find his way back? John asked suddenly, desperate for reassurance. He did. It took time, but he did. The tailor met John's eyes in the mirror. Love is patient, Mr. Miller. It endures all things. Thank you, John whispered, finding unexpected comfort in this stranger's words. I needed to hear that today. Meanwhile, at the elegant lake house, Julia was with her friends as Easter weekend began, trying to lose herself in their carefree lifestyle, to forget the hurt in her father's eyes, the words that hung between them like a dark cloud. To the perfect Easter getaway. No parents, no rules, just us. Caroline raised her champagne glass, the expensive crystal catching the light from the chandelier above. The group cheered, except Julia, who seemed distracted, checking her phone. For what seemed like the 100th time that day. Julia, you've been checking your phone all day. Everything okay? Rachel asked, her brow furrowed in concern. You've barely touched your mimosa. My dad usually calls on holiday weekends. It's weird that he hasn't, Julia admitted, putting her phone face down to avoid the temptation to check it again. It's our first Easter apart. I thought you said you needed space from him, Brad questioned, lounging on an expensive outdoor sofa, the lake sparkling behind him. Isn't that why you're here? To get away from all that? I do. It's just... Julia was defensive, unsure how to articulate the conflicting emotions warring inside her. Just what? Wasn't he the embarrassing builder you couldn't wait to get away from? Caroline pressed, a hint of judgment in her tone that made Julia wonder, not for the first time, if she had made a terrible mistake. It's complicated, Julia sighed, turning her attention to the scenic view, hoping to escape further questions. Caroline's mother appeared, elegant in a linen dress that probably cost more than John's monthly salary. Your room all set, Julia? I hope the lake view is to your liking. It's beautiful, Mrs. Preston. Thank you so much for having me, Julia smiled, grateful for the interruption. Of course, dear. Any friend of Caroline's is welcome here, especially the daughter of a business owner. Your father's construction company sounds quite impressive. Julia's smile froze, the lie she'd told coming back to haunt her. Oh, it's not that impressive. Just a small operation. Don't be modest. Caroline says he's quite the entrepreneur. We must have him over sometime. Mrs. Preston patted Julia's arm. Now, dinner is at 7. We're having lamb, an Easter tradition. As she walked away, Julia felt sick to her stomach. The web of half-truths was growing, threatening to entangle her completely. Later, when she was alone in her luxurious guest room, Julia tried calling John again. No answer. That's strange. He always answers, she muttered to herself, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. Always. She tried to focus on a novel, but the words blurred before her eyes. All she could see was her father's face as she'd denied him, the moment his expression had shifted from joy to profound hurt. What kind of person did that make her? What would her mother think if she could see her now? The next day, growing increasingly concerned, Julia called Anthony, her father's friend and colleague of many years. Julia? Haven't heard from you in ages. Anthony sounded surprised, the background noise suggesting he was at a construction site. Your dad mentioned you were staying with friends for Easter. "Anthony, is my dad at work? He's not answering his phone." Julia tried to keep the panic out of her voice, but wasn't entirely successful. "John hasn't been to the site in days. We thought he was with you for Easter." The concern in Anthony's voice mirrored Julia's own fear. "Days? That's not like him at all." Julia's worry grew, her mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. Did something happen? Is he sick? Not exactly. "Look, Julia, it's not my place to say anything. You should really talk to your father." Anthony's evasive answer only increased Julia's anxiety. "I'm trying to. He's not answering his phone, and apparently he's not at work. Where is he?" Julia demanded, pacing the guest room, her heart racing. Anthony sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Last I saw him, he was headed to that fancy car dealership on Fifth Avenue, the one with all the European imports." "My dad? At a luxury car dealership? That doesn't make any sense." Julia stopped pacing, trying to process this bizarre information. Her father, who drove the same truck for 15 years, who carefully budgeted every expense at a high-end car showroom? "Are you sure it was him?" "Like I said, you should talk to him," Anthony replied cryptically. "Some things a father should tell his daughter himself." Julia hung up, thoroughly confused and increasingly concerned. She spent the rest of the day trying to reach her father, without success. The uncomfortable feeling in her stomach grew. Had her harsh words driven him to do something reckless? Was he in trouble? Ill? The possibilities tormented her throughout the luxurious dinner Caroline's parents hosted that evening, making the expensive food taste like ash in her mouth. That night, Julia dreamed of her mother. They were in their old kitchen, Mary at the stove stirring something that smelled like heaven, her dark hair pulled back in the simple ponytail she'd always worn. "Mom?" Julia approached cautiously, half afraid the vision would vanish if she moved too quickly. Mary turned, her smile as warm, as Julia remembered. "There you are, sweetheart. Set the table, will you? Your father will be home soon." Julia obeyed, the familiar routine comforting even in this dream state. "Mom, I've made a terrible mistake. I hurt Dad. I denied him in front of my friends." Mary continued stirring, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know why we always made such a big deal about Easter, Julia? Because of Jesus rising from the dead." "Yes, but more than that. It's about what that resurrection means for us, here and now." Mary turned to face her daughter fully. "It means that no failure is final. No mistake is beyond redemption. No relationship is beyond repair when love is at its foundation. But what I said, what I did, was hurtful. Yes." Mary's eyes were kind but firm. "But Easter teaches us that even after the darkest Friday, Sunday's coming. The question is, will you let pride keep you in the tomb, or will you step out into the light of a new beginning?" Julia awoke with tears on her cheeks, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Outside her window, the pre-dawn light of Easter Sunday was just beginning to paint the sky with promise. On Easter Sunday morning, Caroline's family hosted a lavish brunch on their lakeside patio. Servers circulated with champagne and gourmet dishes, while a string quartet played softly in the background. It was exactly the sort of scene Julia had imagined when dreaming of fitting in with her wealthy friends. Yet she had never felt more out of place. Julia was picking at her food, her appetite gone when Brad nudged her, nearly spilling his mimosa in excitement. "Hey, check out that car pulling up. Is that a Bentley?" Julia glanced over and nearly dropped her fork. A gleaming silver luxury car had stopped at the property gate. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man in an impeccable suit, designer, sunglasses, and a confident stride she barely recognized until he removed the glasses, revealing the familiar kind eyes that had watched over her all her life. "Dad!" she whispered in disbelief, her world tilting on its axis. "Wait, the builder guy is your dad?" Caroline stood up, mouth agape. And he drives a Bentley? Julia was speechless as John approached the group, turning heads with every step. His transformation so complete that even Caroline's status-conscious parents straightened up with interest. "Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter," he said smoothly, a newfound confidence in his bearing that had nothing to do with the expensive suit and everything to do with the purpose in his eyes. "I hope I'm not intruding." Caroline's parents rushed forward. The same people who Julia imagined would have ignored her father days ago now falling over themselves to welcome him. "Not at all. You must be Julia's father. She's told us so much about you." "Has she?" John's eyes found Julia's, a hint of sadness behind his smile that cut her to the quick. "All good things, I hope." "Of course. Your construction company sounds very impressive," Caroline's father gushed, clapping John on the shoulder as if they were old friends. "We've been considering some renovations ourselves. Perhaps we could discuss possibilities." Julia stared in shock, unable to process the scene unfolding before her. What was happening? How had her father, her humble, hard-working father, transformed into this man who seemed so at ease in a world she had been struggling to enter? "Dad, can we talk?" she finally managed, finding her voice. "Privately?" They walked to a quiet spot by the lake, the morning sun casting diamonds across the water, a beauty Julia was too preoccupied to notice. "What's going on? The car, the suit. Anthony said you haven't been to work in days." The questions tumbled out, confusion and concern battling for dominance in her voice. John took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you remember what I was trying to tell you before you left? The important news?" Julia nodded, suddenly ashamed, remembering how she had cut him off, too wrapped up in her own drama to listen. "I won the lottery, Julia. $20 million. "What?" she gasped, the ground seeming to shift beneath her feet. "When? How?" 3 weeks ago. I was going to surprise you at Easter, our special holiday, a time of resurrection and new beginnings. I was going to tell you that you wouldn't have to worry about tuition or scholarships or fitting in anymore." The pain in John's voice was evident, the joy of his good fortune overshadowed by the rift it had accidentally created. Tears filled Julia's eyes as the full impact of her behavior hit home. "And instead, I told you I was ashamed of you." "Money doesn't change who we are, Julia. It just changes how others see us. Like your friends over there, fawning over the man they wouldn't give a second glance to 3 days ago." John nodded toward Saad, the group on the patio, who were not so subtly watching their interaction. As if on cue, Caroline approached, her smile bright and artificial. "Julia, you never told us your father was so successful. A construction company owner, and clearly doing very well." She smiled brightly at John, not a trace of the condescension she would have shown to a mere builder visible in her expression. "My father would love to discuss business opportunities with you, Mr. Miller. He's on the board of several development companies." "Thank you, but I'm afraid I have prior commitments today. Easter is a family holiday, after all." He turned to Julia, a question in his eyes. "Unless my daughter has other plans?" Before Julia could answer, Brad and Rachel joined them, their expressions less friendly than Caroline's, a suspicious gleam in their eyes. "So, Julia," Rachel began, a sharp edge to her voice that had never been there during their friendship. "Funny how your dad went from being just a builder working on your house to driving a Bentley and owning a construction company. Care to explain?" Julia looked at the ground, shame washing over her in waves. "I lied to you, all of you. John is my father. He's been a builder all his life until..." She glanced at her father. "Apparently very recently. You were ashamed of him," Brad stated flatly. "Of his job." "I was stupid," Julia admitted, tears threatening again. "I was insecure and shallow and so desperate to fit in that I denied the best man I've ever known. You know what's really pathetic?" Caroline crossed her arms, her friendly facade dropping away to reveal the judgment beneath. Not that your dad was a builder, that you couldn't see that he was worth being proud of, that you thought any of us would care more about what your father does than who you are. Actually, Caroline, that's not entirely true, is it? John interrupted gently. Your mother asked about my occupation within 30 seconds of meeting me, just now. Your father immediately mentioned business opportunities. You yourself have treated me completely differently in this suit than you did when I was in my work clothes. Caroline flushed, unable to deny the accusation. That's not fair. We're just being polite. No, you're being status conscious, just like Julia was. John put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. The difference is, she's young enough to learn from her mistake, to recognize that true worth comes from character, not cash. I think you should go, Rachel added, the hurt in her eyes making it clear that the deception cut deeper than Julia had imagined. Both of you, this is a family gathering. John put his arm around his daughter, a shield of unconditional love against the rejection she had brought upon herself. Come on, Julia. Let's go home. We have Easter dinner to prepare. In the car, Julia couldn't stop crying, the elegant interior of the Bentley blurring through her tears. I'm so sorry, Dad. I've been horrible to you. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. Easter is about forgiveness, about second chances, about redemption. John's voice was gentle, the same voice that had soothed her childhood nightmares and teenage heartbreaks. Why did you come looking for me today? Because you're my daughter. Nothing changes that. Not your words, not my money, not even your rejection. John reached over to squeeze her hand. Love isn't conditional, Julia. It doesn't demand perfection. It just is. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Julia whispered, the weight of her behavior settling heavily on her shoulders. That's the beautiful thing about forgiveness. It's not about deserving. It's about love. It's about grace. John smiled, the familiar crinkles around his eyes bringing a fresh wave of nostalgia and regret. Besides, I've made plenty of mistakes myself. Who am I to withhold forgiveness when I've needed it so often? As they pulled into the driveway of their modest home, Julia was confused. I thought with the lottery money, I bought the construction company, set up college funds for all the workers' kids, donated to the cancer center that took care of your mother. John turned off the engine and turned to face her fully. But this house? This is where we became a family, where your mother lived, where you took your first steps and lost your first tooth and learned to ride a bike in that driveway. Some things money shouldn't change. Inside, John led Julia to the dining room, where a simple Easter meal was prepared, the same traditional dishes they had shared every year since she was a child. Ham, scalloped potatoes, green beans, rolls. Nothing fancy, everything meaningful. I'd hoped we'd be eating this together, John said quietly. I made all your favorites. Can we? Julia asked timidly, hardly daring to hope that reconciliation could be this simple. Of course. But first, John handed her an envelope, similar to the one he had tried to show her days earlier. Your Easter gift. Julia opened it with trembling fingers to find papers for the construction company with her name listed as co-owner, the legal language confirming that she, Julia Miller, now held a significant stake in Harrington, now Miller, Construction. Dad, I don't understand. She looked up, confusion evident in her tear-stained face. You're going to work with me this summer. Learn the business from the ground up, just like I did. Wear work boots and carry lumber and feel the satisfaction of building something real with your hands. John's voice was firm, but loving. And maybe along the way you'll meet the men and women who've kept me going all these years. The ones who've been a family to us when we had no one else. The ones who aren't ashamed of calloused hands and honest work. But what about college? Julia asked, her mind spinning with this unexpected turn of events. You'll go back in the fall, with a new perspective, I hope. with the understanding that where you come from isn't something to escape. It's the foundation you build your future on. John sat down across from her, his expression serious. The money changes our circumstances, Julia. It doesn't change who we are, or who we should aspire to be. Julia hugged her father tightly, the familiar scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd used all her life, bringing a fresh wave of tears. I don't deserve this second chance. None of us do. That's the miracle of Easter. Death and resurrection. The old Julia died when she walked out that door. The question is, who will you choose to become now? Someone worthy of being your daughter. John smiled, the smile that had guided her through every storm of her life. You already are. You always have been. You just forgot for a while. They sat down to their Easter meal, father and daughter, broken and rebuilt, like the Savior whose resurrection they celebrated. A simple carpenter who changed the world not through worldly wealth, but through sacrifice and love. Dad, Julia said hesitantly as they began to eat. Tell me about when you found out. About the lottery, I mean. John chuckled, setting down his fork. It was the most ordinary day. I'd been at the Petersons' site. You remember them? The addition with all the windows? Julia nodded, memories flooding back of accompanying her father to work sites as a child, proudly holding his measuring tape while he marked lumber for cutting. I stopped for gas on the way home and bought a ticket like I do every month. Just one. Our tradition. Your mother's birthday as the lucky number. His eyes grew distant with the memory. I didn't check it until 3 days later. Was sitting right here at this table eating cereal when I saw the numbers on my phone, nearly choked on my Cheerios. What did you do first? Julia asked, trying to imagine her practical, level-headed father facing such life-changing news alone. Went to work. John laughed at her surprised expression. What else would I do? Had a roof to finish before the rain came in. The money could wait. Keeping my word couldn't. That's so you. Julia shook her head, smiling through her tears. Most people would have quit on the spot. Most people haven't spent 25 years building a reputation for reliability, John shrugged. Besides, I needed time to think, to figure out what this meant for us, for you. Did you tell anyone? Just Anthony, and only because I needed someone to help me keep it quiet until I could tell you first. Easter seemed perfect. Our special day, a symbol of new beginnings. He reached for her hand across the table. I wanted to surprise you with the news that you wouldn't have to worry anymore, that you could finish school without those late nights at the coffee shop, that you could focus on your studies instead of how to make ends meet. Fresh tears filled Julia's eyes. And instead, I showed you that money was all I cared about, that I was willing to deny my own father for the sake of fitting in with people who only care about appearances. No, Julia, you showed me that I hadn't fully understood what you were going through, the pressure you were feeling. John's voice was gentle. Your mother and I always taught you that character matters more than cash, but we never had to navigate the world you're in now. College is different from our day. The wealth gap is more visible. The pressure to belong is more intense. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, it doesn't. But it helps me understand it. John squeezed her hand. And understanding is the first step toward healing. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the familiar tastes of their traditional Easter meal bringing comfort to them both. These potatoes taste just like Mom's, Julia said softly. They should. It's her recipe. John smiled. When she knew she was running out of time, she wrote down all her recipes for me. Said a girl needs her mother's cooking, even when her mother's gone. Julia's eyes filled with tears again. I miss her so much sometimes. Me too, sweetheart. Every day. John's voice was rough with emotion. But she's never really gone. She's in these recipes, in the garden she planted, in your laugh that sounds just like hers, and most of all, in the values she instilled in you. values that got temporarily misplaced, but were never truly lost. How can you be so sure of that? Because I know my daughter. John's faith in her was absolute, unwavering. The same girl who gave her lunch money to a classmate who forgot his, who spent her 16th birthday visiting nursing homes instead of having a party, who worked through high school to save for college so I wouldn't have to shoulder it all alone. I haven't been that girl for a while now, Julia admitted, ashamed. You've always been that girl. You just got lost for a little while. John's smile was tender. It happens to all of us. The important thing is finding your way back. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where photo albums lay waiting on the coffee table. I thought we might look through these tonight, John explained. Remember where we came from, who we are. They spent hours poring over photographs. Julia as a toddler on John's shoulders, Mary teaching Julia to bake cookies, family camping, trips where they slept under the stars because they couldn't afford a hotel. Page after page of a life built on love rather than luxury. Look at how happy we were, Julia marveled, tracing a photo of the three of them at the beach, their clothes clearly secondhand but their smiles radiant. We had nothing, but it felt like everything. We had what mattered, John corrected gently. Each other, faith, community, purpose. Julia nodded, understanding dawning. The very things I've been missing at school, no matter how many expensive outings or exclusive parties I attended. You know, John said thoughtfully, your mother and I worried sometimes that our financial struggles would make things harder. For you, that you'd resent the things we couldn't provide. Never, Julia insisted, then caught herself. Well, maybe sometimes as a teenager, but looking back, I see that you gave me everything that truly mattered. Security, confidence, values, and now we have this unexpected blessing. John gestured around them, indicating the changes the lottery win would bring. The question is, what will we do with it? How will we make it matter? Julia was quiet for a moment, reflecting on all she'd learned in the past few days. We'll use it to build something meaningful, just like you've always done, one brick at a time. Together, John nodded, approval shining in his eyes. As the evening grew late, Julia helped her father clear, the dishes falling easily into the familiar rhythm they'd established over years of shared chores. It felt right, being home, being herself. Dad, she said as they finished, I think I understand now. All these years I thought you were just a builder. But you weren't building houses. You were building a life for us, a foundation. That's all any parent tries to do, sweetheart. Sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we fail. But we never stop trying to construct something that will last, like the real meaning of Easter. Julia nodded, a new understanding dawning. It's not about fancy brunches or chocolate bunnies. It's about the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate second chance. About love that's stronger than death itself. Exactly. John smiled, the pride in his eyes washing away the last of her shame. Jesus was a carpenter's son too, you know, never ashamed of his humble beginnings. In the soft glow of candlelight, they joined hands in prayer, giving thanks for second chances in the true meaning of Easter, that even after our darkest Friday, Sunday's resurrection is always possible. That broken relationships can be mended, that wounded hearts can heal, that love transcends all barriers of pride and circumstance. As the spring sun set on their small home, casting long shadows across the familiar rooms, Julia looked around with new eyes. This wasn't a place to escape from. It was a place to build from. A foundation of love, sacrifice, and now, forgiveness. Happy Easter, Dad, she whispered, squeezing his weathered hand. Happy Easter, my sweet girl, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Welcome home. Outside, The Easter lilies Mary had planted years ago bloomed white against the darkening sky, symbols of purity, rebirth, and the promise that even from the coldest ground, new life will always emerge when the time is right. The next morning, Julia woke early, her mind already racing with plans. She found her father in the kitchen, making coffee. Not the expensive gourmet blend he could now afford, but the same modest brand they'd always drunk. "Morning, Dad," she greeted him, accepting the mug he offered with a grateful smile. "I've been thinking about the construction company." "Oh?" John raised an eyebrow, curious. "If I'm going to learn the business this summer, I should start by understanding every aspect of it. The finances, the planning, the actual building process." Julia's eyes shone with determination. "I want to do this right, Dad. Not just because you want me to, but because I want to honor what you've built." John's expression softened with pride. "That's my girl." "And I've been thinking about college too," Julia continued. "I've been so focused on fitting in that I've lost sight of why I'm there in the first place. To learn, to grow, to prepare for a future that matters." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when I go back in the fall, things will be different. I'll be different." Julia set down her coffee cup, her decision made. "I'm going to find friends who value me for who I am, not what I have. I'm going to focus on my studies instead of social climbing. And most importantly, I'm going to remember every day where I came from and who helped me get where I am." John nodded, understanding the significance of her words. "It won't always be easy. Old habits die hard, I know, but I have a pretty good example to follow." Julia smiled at her father. A man who never forgot his values, even when $20 million fell into his lap. After breakfast, they drove to the cemetery where Mary was buried, bringing fresh Easter lilies to place on her grave. Standing before the simple headstone, John put his arm around Julia's shoulders. "She would be so proud of you," he said softly. "Not because of any accomplishment or status, but because of who you're choosing to become." "Do you think she knows?" Julia asked, her voice small. "About my mistake? About making it right?" "I believe she does." John's faith was unwavering. "And I believe she understands. We all lose our way sometimes. The important thing is finding the path back home." They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts and memories of the woman who had shaped their lives so profoundly. "Dad," Julia said finally, "tell me about Mom. Not the stories I already know, but the things only you would notice. The little things that made her who she was." John smiled, grateful for the chance to share these precious memories. She hummed. When she cooked, always slightly off-key. She cried at commercials with babies or puppies. She kept a journal where she wrote down one thing she was thankful for every single day, even during her illness. "What was she thankful for then?" Julia asked, trying to imagine finding gratitude in the midst of such suffering. "You. Me. A beautiful sunrise. The kindness of nurses. A good cup of tea." John's voice was soft with remembrance. "She found joy in the smallest things, Julia. That was her gift to us both, teaching us to see beauty and blessing everywhere, not just in the obvious places." On their way home, John took an unexpected detour, driving to the rougher part of town. "Where are we going?" Julia asked, confused. "There's something I want to show you." John's expression was unreadable as he navigated the increasingly unfamiliar streets. They pulled up in front of a rundown apartment building, its facade crumbling, windows patched with cardboard in places. "This is where we lived when you were born," John explained, watching surprise spread across his daughter's face. "Your mother and I were just starting out. I was working 2 jobs, and we could barely make rent. But we were determined to give you a better life than we had." Julia stared at the dilapidated building, trying to imagine her parents there, young and struggling, but filled with hope for their future. One night, during a terrible storm, The roof leaked so badly that water was pouring into your nursery. John continued. I stayed up all night, holding an umbrella over your crib while your mother caught the water in buckets. We were exhausted, soaked, and frightened about how we'd pay for repairs. What did you do? Julia was fully engaged in the story now, seeing a side of her parents' lives she'd never known. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. It was our neighbors, all of them. People who had just as little as we did. They'd brought tools, materials, coffee, food. Together, we fixed the roof that day. John's eyes grew distant with the memory. Not one of them asked for payment. Not one expected anything in return. They just saw a need and filled it. Why are you telling me this now? Julia asked, though she was beginning to understand. Because that day taught me something I never forgot. That true community, true belonging, isn't about what you have. It's about how you care for one another. John turned to face her fully. Those people in their designer clothes, with their luxury cars and lake houses, they might never understand what it means to depend on the kindness of others, to build something meaningful together. Julia nodded slowly, the lesson taking root. And that's why you bought the construction company, why you set up funds for the workers' children. You're paying forward what was given to you. Exactly. Easter isn't just about one resurrection, Julia. It's about the constant opportunity for renewal, for taking what seems dead and bringing it back to life. John gestured toward the old apartment building. From these humble beginnings came everything we have. Never be ashamed of the journey, no matter where it leads. As they drove home, Julia's mind was full of new perspectives, new understanding. The next day, she would begin her apprenticeship at Miller Construction, learning the business from the ground up. In the fall, she would return to college with a clearer sense of purpose and identity. Dad, she said suddenly, what if we established a scholarship for kids from backgrounds like ours, who have the ability but not the resources to pursue higher education? John glanced at her with approval. I think that's a wonderful idea. What would you call it? The Mary Miller Foundation, Julia replied without hesitation. Mom always believed in the power of education to transform lives. She did indeed. John's voice was thick with emotion. She would be honored by such a legacy. That evening, as they relaxed on the porch swing that had been a fixture of their home for as long as Julia could remember, John handed her a small, worn Bible. This was your mother's, he explained. She marked passages that meant something special to her. I thought you might like to have it now. Julia accepted the precious gift with reverent hands, carefully opening it to find her mother's neat handwriting. In the margins, verses underlined, thoughts captured on the pages. One passage in particular caught her eye, 2 Corinthians 5:17, heavily underlined. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. Her favorite Easter verse, John explained, seeing where she was looking. She believed so strongly in the power of renewal, of second chances. Like the one you've given me, Julia said softly. Like the one God gives all of us. Every day. John put his arm around her shoulders. That's the miracle of Easter, Julia. Not just something that happened 2,000 years ago, but something that can happen in our lives here and now. Death to our old selves, our pride, our shame, our misplaced values. Resurrection to a new way of being. As night fell, they sat in comfortable silence, the gentle creaking of the porch swing a lullaby from Julia's childhood. The stars emerged one by one, diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. Do you remember what Mom used to say about the stars? John asked quietly. Julia smiled at the memory. That they're God's nightlights. So we never have to be afraid of the dark. And we never have to be, John affirmed. No matter how dark things seem, light always returns. That's the promise of Easter. Across the street, their neighbors' children were hunting for Easter eggs by flashlight, their excited voices carrying on the evening breeze. Julia watched them with new eyes, seeing not just a holiday tradition, but a metaphor for life itself. The search for unexpected blessings, hidden treasures waiting to be discovered in the most ordinary places. "Dad," she said thoughtfully, "thank you for not giving up on me." "Never even crossed my mind, sweetheart." John's smile was reflected in his voice. Love doesn't give up. It perseveres. It endures. It hopes all things, believes all things. Julia leaned her head against her father's shoulder, just as she had countless times throughout her childhood. In that moment, she felt the full circle of their journey, from the struggling young family in that dilapidated apartment to their present circumstances, now transformed by unexpected fortune. But the real transformation, she realized, wasn't in their bank account or social status. It was in her heart, in the renewal of values temporarily forgotten, but now reclaimed with deeper understanding and appreciation. "I think I finally understand what Easter is truly about," she whispered. "Tell me," John encouraged. "It's about seeing beyond appearances to what's real and eternal. It's about love that's willing to suffer for the sake of others. It's about finding hope when all seems lost." Julia's voice grew stronger with conviction. "Most of all, it's about the courage to let our old selves die so something better can be born." John nodded, pride shining in his eyes. "Couldn't have said it better myself." As the moon rose higher in the sky, they continued their quiet conversation, making plans for the future. Not just how to use their newfound wealth, but how to ensure it became a blessing rather than a burden. How to maintain their values in changed circumstances. How to honor Mary's memory by living with the same generosity and grace she had embodied. In her room that night, Julia opened her mother's Bible again, finding more treasured passages, more glimpses into the faith that had sustained her parents through hardship and loss. On the inside cover, she found an inscription she had never noticed before, written in her mother's hand. "To my beloved daughter Julia, may you always remember that our true worth comes not from what we have, but from whose we are. In Christ, we are chosen, redeemed, and deeply loved. No earthly treasure can compare to this inheritance. All my love, Mom." Tears flowed freely as Julia traced her mother's handwriting, feeling connected across time and space to the woman who had given her life, taught her faith, and planted seeds of character that were only now coming to full bloom. Outside her window, the Easter lilies glowed silver in the moonlight, their trumpet-shaped blossoms proclaiming the message of the season, that from death comes life, that no darkness is permanent, that love, true love, can roll away any stone that blocks our path to becoming who we were meant to be. "Thank you, Mom," Julia whispered to the quiet room. "I understand now. And somewhere beyond the stars, beyond the veil that separates this life from the next, she felt certain her mother had heard and was smiling. As our story comes to a close, I hope you've felt the powerful message at its heart. We've witnessed how John and Julia's journey reflects the true meaning of Easter: resurrection, forgiveness, and the chance for new beginnings. What choices will you make in your own life? Will you, like Julia, learn to value the foundations that made you who you are? Or will you continue chasing approval from people who only care about appearances? Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account, but by the love in your heart and the integrity in your actions. Sometimes we need to lose our way before we can truly find ourselves again. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need this message today. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to light. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that will not just entertain you, but also inspire you to reflect on what truly matters in life. Until next time, remember that every day offers the promise of resurrection, the chance to leave behind our mistakes and step into a new beginning.